Hello all, this is my next video in the series of clinically oriented anatomy case-based questions and answers with explanations. This will help in integrating the knowledge of anatomy with clinical aspects. This video has 5 clinical scenario-based MCQs related to head and neck part 1. Now coming to scenario 1, a 40-year-old man complains of weakness when opening his mouth. A comprehensive evaluation reveals that his problems are due to difficulty protruding the mandible, and when protrusion is attempted, the mandible deviates to the right side. Which of the following muscles is most likely weakened or paralyzed in this man? The options are A. Masseter, B. Right lateral pterygoid, C. Temporalis, D. Left lateral pterygoid. And the correct answer is B. Right lateral pterygoid. So let's see the various movements of the mandible taking place at the temporomandibular joint. The main movements are protrusion, retraction, elevation, depression, and in addition to this there is lateral or side to side movements. The protrusion is done by lateral pterygoid assisted by medial pterygoid. Retraction is mainly done by the posterior horizontal fibers of temporalis, deep part of masseter, geniohyoid and digastric muscles. Elevation is done by the anterior vertical and the middle oblique fibers of temporalis, masseter and medial pterygoid, whereas depression is done mainly by the lateral pterygoid, and when the mouth is opened wide or against resistance, it is done by digastric, geniohyoid and mylohyoid muscles. In addition to this, the lateral pterygoid not only does protrusion and depression of mandible, the lateral pterygoid also turns the chin to opposite side. So the left lateral pterygoid will turn the chin to right side and the right lateral pterygoid will turn the chin to left side. So in this case, the mandible deviates to the right side. It means that the left side lateral pterygoid is acting and pushes the mandible to the right side. So the right lateral pterygoid is weakened or paralyzed. So when the patient tries to protrude or open the mouth, it is deviated to the same side because of the opposite lateral pterygoid muscle which pushes the chin to the weakened side. So the correct answer is right lateral pterygoid. Now coming to scenario 2, a 55-year-old man is brought to the emergency room with serious head injury in a road accident. A surgery in the region of Pterion is being considered to be performed on him to evacuate the epidural hematoma. The vessel which got torn in this case is most probably the A. Cerebral vein, B. Posterior cerebral artery, C. Sigmoid sinus, D. Middle meningeal artery. And the correct answer is D. Middle meningeal artery. So the hematoma in this case is the epidural, also known as extradural hematoma, in which there is collection of blood outside the dura mater between the dura and the bone of the skull, as we can see here, because of the rupture or the tearing of the middle meningeal artery. So the most common cause of extradural or epidural hematoma is the rupture of middle meningeal artery, which are outside the dura mater. Their course is extradural, close to the bone. So this is the rupture of middle meningeal artery leading to epidural hematoma, whereas the subdural hematoma, as we can see here, the subdural hematoma is a collection of blood between dura and arachnoid mater, and it is mostly because of the tearing or rupture of a cerebral vein as it enters a venous sinus. In this case, the cerebral vein entering the superior sagittal sinus So there is rupture of the vein leading to collection of blood in the subdural space. Whereas subarachnoid hemorrhage is mainly because of the rupture of cerebral arteries, mainly the arteries which form the circle of Willis. So the rupture of the artery lead to collection of blood in the subarachnoid space between arachnoid and pia mater. There is a condition known as Berry's aneurysm. Here there is a weakening of a part of arterial wall in the artery which participate in the circle of Willis. So the rupture of this will lead to collection of blood in the subarachnoid space. So these are the three important hemorrhages: epidural or extradural space, extradural hemorrhage, then there is a subdural space in which there is subdural hemorrhage, and subarachnoid space in which there is a subarachnoid hemorrhage. Coming to scenario 3, a 29-year-old woman presents with pain and swelling in the floor of the mouth. Bimanual palpation and later computed tomography revealed a 5 mm stone which is known as cyalolith in the left submandibular salivary gland. So the stone is in the submandibular salivary duct. If the submandibular duct is partially obstructed, where would the physician observe salivation in the oral cavity after applying pressure to the left submandibular gland? The options are A. Sublingual fold, B. Oral vestibule, C. Base of lingual frenulum, D. Opposite maxillary second molar tooth. And the correct answer is C. Base of lingual frenulum. So we just have to know here the opening of the submandibular salivary duct. So because here there is a occlusion or obstruction in the submandibular duct, it is a partial obstruction. So when the physician apply pressure over to the submandibular gland, there would be secretion seen in the region where there is opening of the duct. So the submandibular salivary duct opens where? At the base of lingual frenulum. As we can see from the figure, when we elevate the tongue in the inferior surface, that is in the floor of the mouth, we can see first of all there is a frenulum of the tongue on the inferior surface in the midline. And if we see the base of the frenulum of the tongue, here on each side we can see folds. These are the sublingual fold, deep to which lies sublingual salivary gland. And on the medial side we can see here there is sublingual caruncle, also known as sublingual papilla, on the summit of which opens the duct of the submandibular salivary gland. So the submandibular salivary duct opens in the floor of mouth at the summit of the sublingual papilla or caruncle, here at the base of the frenulum of the tongue. Whereas the sublingual ducts, there are numerous sublingual ducts which open directly in the floor of mouth along the sublingual fold. So the correct answer is base of lingual frenulum, where we can see the opening of the submandibular duct. The sublingual fold is not correct answer because the duct of sublingual gland open along the sublingual fold. Oral vestibule is a space between the lips, cheeks and the gums and teeth, whereas the opening of parotid duct will be opposite the maxillary second molar tooth. So the correct answer is the base of lingual frenulum. Coming to scenario 4, a first year resident attempts to insert a central venous catheter into the heart by a subclavicular approach into the subclavian vein. Following the attempt, it is noted that the patient has difficulty breathing. Which nervous structure lying immediately deep, that is posterior to subclavian vein, as it crosses the anterior scalene muscle, may have been injured? The options are A. Phrenic nerve, B. Cervical sympathetic chain, C. Vagus nerve, D. Ansa cervicalis. The correct answer is A. Phrenic nerve. So from the figure here we can see the relation of the phrenic nerve with the anterior scalene muscle and the subclavian vessels. The phrenic nerve here runs down superficial to anterior scalene muscle, and as it runs down, it runs in front of subclavian artery and posterior to the subclavian vein. So because of the close proximity of the phrenic nerve with subclavian vein, this is the most likely nerve to be irritated or injured, leading to difficulty breathing, because the phrenic nerve eventually supplies the diaphragm. The other two structures, that is vagus nerve and the sympathetic trunk, they are medially compared to the phrenic nerve here, so they are less likely to get injured in this procedure. Hypertrophy of the anterior scalene is also one of the cause which may lead to injury to phrenic nerve. Ansa cervicalis is also one of the structures, but it is seen in the carotid triangle medially. So all these three structures, ansa cervicalis, sympathetic trunk and vagus nerve, they are more medially, whereas the phrenic nerve is the only nerve in relation with the subclavian vein. So phrenic nerve is the correct answer. Now coming to scenario 5, a paralyzed right vocal fold leading to dysphonia is most likely associated with which of the following situations or scenarios? The options are: A, a gunshot wound below the right second rib; B, hypertrophy of the anterior scalene muscle; C, repair of an aortic aneurysm; or D, thyroidectomy. And the correct answer is D, thyroidectomy. So from the stem of the question, the affected vocal fold is a right side vocal fold. So the nerve injured will be the right recurrent laryngeal nerve, which supplies the muscles of the right half of the larynx. So because the paralyzed vocal fold is right side, so the injured nerve is a right recurrent laryngeal nerve. So let's see which are the condition out of these four leading to injury to right recurrent laryngeal nerve. So the thyroid gland, as we can see here, the outline of the thyroid gland, the medial surface of thyroid gland is related to recurrent laryngeal nerve as well as external laryngeal nerve, along with trachea in front and esophagus behind. The recurrent laryngeal nerve is ascending between trachea and esophagus, related deep to the lobe of thyroid gland. Now out of the two, right and left, we can see the origin of the two recurrent laryngeal nerve is different on the two sides. The recurrent laryngeal nerve are branches of vagus nerve. On the right side, the right recurrent laryngeal nerve arises from right vagus in the root of neck. This recurrent laryngeal nerve winds round the subclavian artery on the right and then ascends up between trachea and esophagus, related with thyroid gland. But on the left side, the left recurrent laryngeal nerve arises from the left vagus in the thorax, and then it loops around the arch of aorta and then ascends up in the neck, having similar course. So out of the four options, the repair of aortic aneurysm is not the answer, because the arch of aorta is related with left recurrent laryngeal nerve, and that is not the nerve which is injured in this case. Also, hypertrophy of the anterior scalene is not related to recurrent laryngeal nerve, so that is also not the correct answer. A gunshot wound below the right second rib, though the right recurrent laryngeal nerve is involved, but it is not due to gunshot wound below the right second rib, because the right recurrent laryngeal nerve arises in the root of neck and not in the thorax. So even if there is a gunshot wound below the right second rib, the recurrent laryngeal nerve of the right side won't be affected in that case. So the correct option out of 4 is thyroidectomy, that is surgical removal of thyroid gland. And because the thyroid gland is related with both right as well as left recurrent laryngeal nerves, so that is the most likely answer, thyroidectomy. So thank you, and keep sharing, like and subscribe my channel if you benefit from the video, and look forward to more such case based scenarios involving clinical anatomy of all the regions of the body. Thank you.